Okay, I'm ready. Hello everyone to this TED Talk. I'm Sergio Chaparro, a PhD student, and today I would like to talk in a very concise way what's the topic about the problems of law in philosophy of social science. Let's begin with a case that I researched in my doctoral program. You know this classical book of economics called Capital, wrote by this German social scientist as well as philosopher Karl Marx. And notice that in 2024, Princeton University Press gained a prize. This scholar, old writer, a good translation. So it's a classic book on economics. And notice that at least Marx gets 4 laws that suppose govern the capitalist civilization until our days. In 2 ways, he explicitly used the notion of laws. For example, the second one, a general law of accumulation, concentration, and centralization. For example, how we pass from big factory to branches of industries, and in contemporary terms, to trust or multinationals, especially the power nations that govern the world market, for example, United States, according with my region, to Latin America. So, a philosopher of science will get these 2 questions. First one, specific one, do Marx's laws qualify as scientific laws? And in most general thing, are there laws in social science? Let's check it at both positions. Okay, let's start with the concept of social law, that we can use it. First one, the social laws must be a subject matter of social science. It doesn't need to be a natural law. For example, it's wrong to use, it's a categorical error to use a gravitatory law that explains how the society divide or unify. It needs to be specific laws from social science, for example, the law of supply and demand. Second one, the social laws must get social regularities. It needs to happen in the society, of course, in a big way. It is acceptable to use exceptions, interferences, etc. Third one, social laws must be empirical testable by the methods that we use in social science. For example, sociologists, economists, archaeologists use empirical methods. And the next one is, it needs to be logical contingent. It doesn't need to be tautological, yeah, like obvious thing like I is different to B and vice versa. Okay, let's find this kind of philosophers that are disagree against and deny the existence of social laws. What is the 2 basic arguments that they use? The first one is the no existence. They say, okay, in social science exists hedged regularities that follows this form. Whenever A happens, then B happens unless there is an interference. An interference could be inflation, criminality, unemployment, whatever event that occurred in the agents or in the current situation. But what is the trouble here? That in social life there is so diverse the factors that process that occur in there. In natural science, it's possible to get the exceptions, the condition that they cover a law, but in social science there are so many of them, and it's kind of challenging to get all of them because the reality is so complex. There are multi-realizable effects. So what is the conclusion? That social science cannot get a kind of head law because there's not exist kind of social regularity that gives this kind of concept of social law that is equivalent to a natural law in certain way. Now, the second argument that they use is that, okay, it's not necessary to use laws for the practical way of social science, its endeavor. It's not at risk the scientific status of social science. Why? Because the majority of theories, approaches use predictive power, causal explanations, new discoveries. So in a pragmatic way, they get the same effects even without this kind of local claim. And notice that if we deny the existence of social laws, it doesn't imply that the reality is not determined or even whatever ontological aspect of human history. Okay, now let's turn around the battlefield philosophers who support the idea of social laws. If you ask it to me, I support that position. Okay, one argument for the existence of social laws is this one. Social reality is formed by structures. I mean, could be education system, judicial system, and so on. And one of the tasks, or could be the main one, task of social science is discover what is the patterns, the tendencies, the laws that govern this macro process or meso process, micro process of social groups. In terms of Karl Marx, he used the notion of counter tendencies. For example, it's true that in some cases the accumulation of capital could decrease if there is not technological advancements. So the feature of social law is that there is historical, contextual, and there is, that's true, there is so many exceptions, but we need to create an alternative concept of social law that doesn't look similar to natural law. Some philosophers say that this is a weak law version, and finally, because there is a social complexity, we need to develop our methods in order to be more sophisticated. Our tools in social science, I don't know, maybe use artificial intelligence in order to improve. The conclusion is that it's reasonable that there exist social laws. The other argument is indispensability. And in the story of social science, there are several attempts to get social laws. One of famous is Marx and the 4 laws that he posits. So we need to get the wisdom dictum of this amazing Hungarian philosopher of science, Imre Lakatos, that philosophy is blind if avoid to use the history of science. In this case, history of social science. Second one, in practical terms, social scientists, when they try to make explanatory terms, causal prediction, implicitly they are thinking in laws, yeah? And the final issue, in order to improve the development of social science and kind of progress, because there is a crisis in social science, in faculty of humanities especially, they need to posit rigorous terms. For example, Karl Marx really admires Darwin, Newton, David Ricardo, and Adam Smith for his rigorosity. Therefore, social laws are indispensable. Okay, let's turn around to my conclusion. First one, the controversy about social laws still keep alive, as I show in this short talk. Even some contemporary theories or economic approaches abandon or have diminished the idea of load. And the second one, I try to posit an attempt to defend that social laws exist in a weak sense, and it gets deep implications for a current conception of social science and human history. If you are interested in this topic, I highly recommend you to read these three philosophers from the last 3 centuries: 19th century Karl Marx, 20th century Kate Webb, and the contemporary philosopher James Roberts. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you. Just make a few notes. Thank you, Sergio. Okay, very nicely delivered. Good content, good delivery, good structure, good timeliness. So I'm going to now ask first a question very directly related to the talk. So the first part, you reconstructed the argumentation of Roberts, and in the second part you argued for the existence in some big sense of social sciences. How do these two parts relate to each other? I mean, I would be in particular be interested of how Roberts' arguments relate to the second part of the talk, in which you argue for the existence of social sciences. I mean, how can you explain these two to coexist at the same time, or is one of them right?
I try to use this strategy because during this semester I took 2 seminars about philosophy of social science with you, Professor Wallace, and with the other professor Thomas, and I get the 2 opposite views.
Okay.
And for me it was interesting mix the lectures,
Sure.
The Roberts and the other position, because you notice that James Roberts is so categorical that there's no exist in any way. Of course, it occurs in 2004. I don't know, he has changed his mind. But I guess it is interesting to see in the public divulgation of philosophy or knowledge to get both sides trying to balance in.
I understand that and this was very nice. I'm interested in how the arguments relate to each other. So Roberts gives an argument, the conclusion is that there are no social science laws. If the second part of the talk is right, then something must be wrong with Roberts' argument.
Okay.
Yeah? So
okay.
what is the premise which is misusing?
We discussed during the section that you show us. I guess one possible answer is that maybe Roberts is trying to be kind of restrictive or normative with the notion of social law, because he tried to make a parallel with natural law, with distinctions, of course, because he said that this kind of regularity is not strict, or is not statistical, it's heritage. But for him, it's problematic that I guess one way to target or refuting James Roberts is target 2 things: the concept of social law, that does understand that thing, and the other one is the idea of regularity of the history of social science. There are several attempts that can get in certain way. Yeah.
So, but what is the second line of thinking among these 2 possibilities which you just said? Which one it is targeting? I mean, which one is it refuting? Is it refuting the first, somehow the normative aspect of laws, or I mean? So I just want to understand better how the second, the pro-law camp, the person who you talked about. According to him, according to them, what is wrong with Roberts' assumptions? I mean, what is the assumption of Roberts which is not working? Which one?
Of course, I need to confess that this is no so elaborated, but I guess, as I mentioned before, one of them that is ground is the concept of social law,
Okay.
and the other one, health regularity. I didn't get a deep description. I present the idea
Sure.
without mentioning the authors because
Sure.
a general public, it was the main arguments that each field
Okay.
used.
Okay, thank you. Okay, my second question is again about your talk. You mentioned this issue of multiple realization, which Roberts is invoking to give his arguments against social science laws. Can you explain to me what is multiple realization and how does that feature in Roberts' argument? So what is?
Yeah.
Maybe you can use an example and or just general as you wish.
Okay. At first sight, we can understand like multiple realizable.
Multiple realization, yeah.
Multiple realization, like there are so many factors, process, effects involved in society that is difficult to task. But I guess in a second size, in a deep way, I guess the idea that he used about that is not is because there are a lot or so diverse. In nature, especially, I don't know, biology is so diverse, how it works, the oceans, the several species, the behavior. Is more like that, that this kind of, his main problem with multiple realization is that it doesn't gain the idea of head regularities or something like that.
So first of all, how would you define multiple realization? What is multiple realization? So social kind is multiply realized. What does that mean?
That given a specific situation, it could get several course of action or effects that a problem gets.
Can you give me an example, maybe?
Okay. Let's use the current news. Maybe what could be the operation of U.S. in Venezuela? Yeah, it could be a direct invasion. It could be kidnapping the president. It could be rhetoric, and it could realize several ways. And after, a posteriori, even that is very difficult to social scientists get all the conditions by comparing with natural work, because natural science try to use experiments, control experiments, and deal better with the factors. But in social world, there are so many. But I don't know if I'm wrong about that.
So it is so. So in this case of the Venezuela news, so in Roberts' argument, multiple realization is connecting social kind with physical, with underlying physical processes. So what would be these multiple different physical processes which would somehow multiply realize the say the Maduro kidnapping or?
Okay, yeah, he used the expression, that philosopher used the expression of physical systems,
Okay.
Social systems or process. He said, for example, if we think in terms of physical systems, we are going to try how it works, the modern technology, to kidnap a president, remove the electricity, how it works, special radar, network communications, the physical properties. So an engineer and a specialist can get all the variables in in normal way to control the interference or conditions, because natural will also cure interference. But in social science, the multiple realization could be more ways of actions.
Okay, and then how does this, I mean, why would this be an argument against social laws? So the fact that somehow social kinds are multiply realized, why would that be an argument against the existence of social laws?
I'm not sure if James Robert is trying to get in one part of the test, he said like, okay, we can make an empirical test of chaotic loads and solve that issue. But he said, no, my point is not that, it's more theoretical. He said, it's very problematic the headed regularities be captured by a claims of law. I guess his refutation or he's against with even there are multiple irregularities or something like that, that we can build a claim considered like a law. He said that it doesn't gonna work.
Okay, thank you. And then my final question, you also mentioned in the talk Lakatos, yeah? So the work of Imre Lakatos. Can you tell me, just summarize very briefly what is the main idea of Imre Lakatos regarding the demarcation problem? Yeah, and then tell me whether Lakatos can indeed, what's your opinion on whether Lakatos can be indeed used in the social sciences as opposed to the natural sciences where he really developed his theory originally?
Can you repeat the last part?
Yes, so the second part of my question is whether Lakatos's ideas can be used in social sciences as opposed to the natural sciences where he actually developed them. Yeah? So Lakatos was mostly worried about physics, and then we discussed during the semester whether his ideas can be used in the social sciences. We even had a reading by hands where there is a claim about this specific question which I just asked.
Okay, I guess Lakatos could be used for both philosophical positions in a symmetric way. How can be used? First one, in the idea that philosophy of science and history of science need to be very connected. It's kind of impossible to make a good theory without use of history, the opposite, and vice versa. In the case of James Roberts, he's very poor the argument in these terms. He only mentioned the law of supply and demand, and that's it. But there's no history of social science there. In the case of Karl Marx or K. Webb, there are more examples. It's more empirical, and I guess it could be better. Of course, the opposite side could be used the same. Could be an expert in economics. Say, okay, I use the several examples using the Lakatos methodology to say that there's no. And thinking about the demarcation problem, yeah, it's totally true that Lakatos wasn't specialized in social science. Of course, he gets a very bad negative claims about Marxist methodology, because in the argument of Lakatos is that when a scientific theory is making a progress, it needs to be success and predictions. And he said, no, it doesn't occur with Marxists, especially during the post.
Why not? Why not? So what is the...
I checked some of his claims and during my research, and he said, like, for example, the followers of Marx didn't get novelty facts. For example, they didn't predict the Soviet Union keeps with problems that gets capitalist society, class divisions. We can say that this is false. In 1936, Trotsky made a prediction about the course, but this is the one of the arguments that he said for using another one. And finally, in terms of the demarcation problem, I guess Lakatosh is very interesting because and it can be used for both philosophical positions, that we need to distinguish the hardcore of a theory and the peripheral core. The peripheral core could be how the research tradition can explain better, follow our example, the contemporary wars in Venezuela, Gaza, yeah. But the hardcore could be in some theories if they defend in a strong or weak way laws. That there is a huge implication. I guess this is the contemporary relevance of Lakatosh.
All right, thank you very much, Sergio. That's it. So after we have the exam with everyone, sit down with you guys.
Okay.
Thank you. And
should I deliver you the presentation?
no, it's good. I don't.